Hello and welcome back to Beyond 50. Today, I'm going to be sharing my experience of upgrading my heating and cooling system to a smart thermostat. And it was an interesting ride. I had originally purchased a Google Nest after going through Google's online compatibility checker to ensure that it would work with my system. And it said it would. However, as I was going through the actual installation process using their app, it ran through the checker again and said it was not compatible with my system. So we ended up having to return the Google Nest, purchase a Ecobee Smart Thermostat, and I was able to get that successfully installed. So I'll give an overview of what a smart thermostat is, a little bit of an overview on my experience with the Nest so far, but this isn't my experience with the Ecobee so far. But this isn't going to be a full review just because I've only had it actually working for a day or two. But primarily go over the installation process. So with that, let's go ahead and dive in. A smart thermostat is essentially the evolution of the programmable thermostats that many of us have been using for years. The traditional programmable thermostats allow you to set a schedule on when you want to decrease the temperature or increase the temperature in your house based on your schedule, but they take a lot of work to program to set the days of the week, the times that you want temperatures to go up or down, and they don't adjust if your schedule adjusts. Whereas smart thermostats, well, one, they can be controlled via a phone, via an app on your phone. They can be voice controlled via Siri or Alexa, but they also can learn your schedule. So using sensors that are built into them or additional sensors around your house, they can tell when you're home, when you're away, when you're sleeping, and then they can build that schedule based on that. And so they take a lot less work to program, and they adjust automatically based on your behaviors. So why switch to one? Well, because it's automatically adjusting the temperature in your house, it becomes even more efficient, and ultimately it saves you money over time. My experience with the Google Nest, I really like the look of the Google Nest. I like the idea of it just being a dial, having a number. It's a nice aesthetic. It looks nice. And so I started off the process by following Google's online compatibility checker, which has me open up the existing thermostat and identify what wires are connected into my existing thermostat, putting those into the checker, and then it tells me whether or not the system is compatible with my heating and cooling system. I have both a heat pump as well as a furnace. And so it's not just a furnace, it's a little bit more complex, but this isn't a super complex system. And there is a little bit of detail, and we'll get into this a little bit more when I'm talking about the Ecobee, on the labeling in the existing thermostat. So some thermostats can support either a conventional just furnace system or a heat pump and an auxiliary furnace, which is what I have. In those sorts of thermostats, there's often labels for both the conventional system and the heat pump system that use the same terminals, but a separate set of labels. So if we look at this picture here, you can see my old thermostat, and you can see that there's labels for conventional wires, and then there's labels for the heat pump wiring. And those are separate. I did enter both of those into the compatibility checker, and it wasn't exactly super clear on the Google Nest site which ones to enter. So, that was a little bit maybe on me making some mistakes and not fully understanding what to do there. The Google's Nest uses the Google Home app to walk you through the installation process. And it again has you do a compatibility checker at the beginning of it. However, when I went through the check on the app, using the exact same wiring and the same wiring labels, it indicated that my system was not compatible. I did try checking it in a few different possible configurations just in the checker to see if it would accept anything, and it would not. And afterwards, I went back to Google's online checker and entered the data back in again, and it still says my system was compatible. So there definitely seems to be some mismatch between Google's online check and the check that they have in the app. Either way, when the app said that the system was not compatible with my wiring and my heating and cooling system, I aborted the installation and really didn't proceed any further. So I don't really have any details on how well the Nest system works once it's installed, because I really ended the installation process fairly early and sent the unit back to Google. So at this point, I went back to the drawing board, did a little bit more online research, and determined that Ecobee was a product that I was interested in based on their reviews and the feature set that they had. They also had a online compatibility checker that went through the same process of asking, hey, which wiring do you have in your existing thermostat? In the Ecobee site, they did have some additional information on their site as you're going through the wizard for identifying whether or not it was for a conventional heating and cooling system or a heat pump model, and how to identify that, and there was a bunch of details. In my existing thermostat, I did have some S1 wires that were labeled in there, which the Ecobee system didn't identify in either their online checker or later in the app. I was able to determine in their online forums that those are due to a external temperature sensor that I had in my heat pump unit that is no longer needed to be hooked up. It would be nice if their checker included that detail directly, but it was this is one of the gaps within their system, but I was able to sort of do just a little bit of research and figure that out. So the installation process with the Ecobee was fairly straightforward. It again used a proprietary app. So you install, first thing you do is install the Ecobee app. You note that you want to add a product. You scan the QR code on the back of the product, and then it starts walking you through the installation process. It again asks you to check which wires that you have connected to your existing thermostat, and then steps you through the process of how to install the Ecobee thermostat. One key thing that I did notice between the Nest and the Ecobee is that the Ecobee actually came with a bunch of little sticker labels to put on your wires as you were removing them. Those were not included in the Nest packaging. So I think that was one more thing that was a little bit of a improvement on the Ecobee installation process over the Nest system, even though I didn't go through the Nest system. So the first step that I basically did was pull the wires out of the existing thermostat and one by one add labels onto them. And so you can see here's what those looked like once they were all labeled. The next step was then removing the old thermostat, which was just unscrewing it, and then installing the Ecobee thermostat, which was, applied by a couple of screws. I got lucky, and one of the existing drywall screws just happened to fit in the same spot. I only had to install one new drywall anchor for this installation. There's also the mounting plate you can see here. That was very optional. You could use it or not. I decided to use it just because the drywall that I had underneath the previous thermostat was a little ugly looking, and this would sort of help cover that up. I think overall, normally I would prefer to install it without it. I think it would look a little cleaner without that mounting plate, but with my drywall, they're not looking very nice. I think for me, it looked better with it installed. The next step was simply plug the previously labeled wires into each of the spots on the Ecobee terminals, and you just push the wires into each terminal, pull them back out and make sure that they're installed securely, and that was it. For the most part, each wire went to the wire that it was labeled with. So Y went to Y, G went to G. There was C went to C. There was one wire, I can't quite recall which one it was, but the app actually told me for this wire, install it into this other label. And so there was one that didn't match name to label to label, but the app was very clear for this wire, put it into this terminal. After that, power it back on and walk through the app, and the app asked a series of additional questions. There were, going through the app, a couple of questions that I did not know the answer to. So the first was, hey, do I have any additional accessories installed? I do have this little condensation pump that is installed next to my furnace. After doing a little research, that is not what it was referring to, so I just skipped that question. And then there was one other question related to my heat pump on whether or not it's energized on heating or cooling, and I really didn't know the answer to that at all. I had to go back, do some research onto my heat pump, look into the manual, and Google was able to tell me the answer to this question, but I had to stop and do that research. So I do think it would be nice if if Ecobee or Nest or any of these companies did have a database that you could enter in your model number, and then they would answer these questions for you, because as a homeowner, you may not know some of these things offhand. I definitely didn't, and I definitely had to pause and do some research through the installation. The only other gotcha that I really have had with this so far is it is cold out right now. And the Ecobee has a setting that says your heat pump will not kick on if it is less than 35 degrees out. And so it took a couple of days before I was able to actually verify that the heat pump was working correctly, because my furnace was kicking on as would be expected. But because it was less than 35 degrees out, the heat pump was not actually kicking in. Additionally, there's a warning if your heat pump doesn't kick on in my system for or if your furnace is running for a certain amount of time without the heat pump kicking in, it sends you a warning that there may be something wrong with your heat pump. It's a little bit odd because it does know that it's not kicking in because it's less than 35 degrees out. So that's a little bit odd. And after doing a little bit of research, I confirmed that this was something that I could confirm. I was also able to verify during one day when it was a little bit warmer that the heat pump was actually kicking on and initiating. So the system is all working as expected. All right, so this has been my experience installing a smart thermostat. It was fairly easy, even though I did have some glitches going through with the Nest compatibility checker. So if you're doing this yourself, I would highly recommend labeling your wires as you disconnect them. I thought that that made the process fairly foolproof. And if I had to revert it and reinstall my previous thermostat, it would ensure that I'd be able to do that. Take pictures while you're doing it. Take some pictures before you disconnect your wires. Make sure that you've got those saved so that you can undo anything that you did. The other thing, before you start, make sure that you disconnect your power. I've seen some things online of people have had some really bad times if they didn't correctly disconnect their power before they got started. So be sure and do that. Use your breaker switches. Ensure that your furnace is fully off before you start this process. So overall, I am very satisfied with the Ecobee so far. I'm still learning it. I'm still understanding all of the tweaks. It does take up to a month before I start getting reports on how much money I've saved. But so far it's been good, and I'm happy that I made this switch. Maybe we'll do a check-in later. Put some comments in here if you want to know more or understand what my experience is, maybe like 3 to 6 months from now. Maybe we can do an update in the summer once we ensure that the cooling is working as well. So that obviously will take a little while before we get to test that out. So if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, consider subscribing. Thank you for checking it out, and we'll be doing more DIY and fixes around the house over the next couple of months. So, and we got something big coming up in the next couple of weeks. So thanks a lot for checking us out, and we'll see you again later.